Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Next Generation Agile Planning. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. Just want to show you a little bit about Cantor first as we start off, give you some background on Cantor and where we are, who we are, and where we go. So bear with me as we're having a little bit of technical difficulties here with the new session. Here we go. First, talk about the audio settings for the webinar. Right now, you're muted, and you can adjust how you hear things through your computer via the toolbar that's in your upper right-hand corner. You just expand that, and you can adjust what you hear in that control panel. Before we begin, a little bit about John and Murray. John is he successfully founded a consulting company days before the 2008 bust that today serves international clients and partners. And Murray is a retired IBM distinguished engineer, a role he held by only 300 out of 75,000 technical staff. At IBM, he led the application of predictive analytics to software and systems planning and development for the Rational brand. Right now, just to let you know, there will be a question and answer session at the end of this, so feel free to type those questions in in that toolbar, the GoToWebinar toolbar that is on the right-hand side of your screen. And now I will turn it over to John and Murray. So welcome, John. Welcome, Murray.
Thanks, Rich. I'm happy to be here with my buddy John. By the way, before we get started, we had some really good questions sent in, some of which we'll answer in the course of the webinar, and some of which are actually sort of at a level of detail beyond which we have time to get to today. We will have time to answer questions at the end, as Richard said, and if there's any questions that aren't answered, and we're really happy to have a separate call to just go through and address whatever questions and concerns you have with what we're doing. The main intent today is to introduce what we say is new generation agile planning, and to provide a very basic and high level introduction to the concepts of that.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Murray and I are actually sitting next to each other despite the two cameras, so if we look at each other, that's just because we're actually sitting here, and that's the natural thing for us to do.
Yes.
And so, as Murray said, we're going to be talking about next generation agile planning, going through some of the topics of what is current planning practices based on years of successful agile practice, as well as some of the new and exciting possibilities that are becoming available to us today. I don't actually see the controls for adjusting the slides.
Okay, 1 second. We'll take care of that. I apologize to everyone. This is the first time using the system, so we're going to fix that right now. So I think you should be able to do that if I did this correctly.
Aha.
Okay, you should have it. You may have to put it into presentation mode, the slideshow.
I'm working on that.
My mouse takes over, so I'm just going to plop it in from the beginning. I'm leaving my mouse alone. You should be able to do everything right now.
Yeah.
There we go. You have to click through all that in the first step. Just click through all this. Sorry, everyone on the phone. This is first time on it, so
we will
care of it and moving forward.
We will manage through this.
Exactly. So there you go.
Are the slides showing up fully visible for everyone else? I'm a little bit
Yes,
clipped.
it is. We're good to go. It's fully visible for everyone.
Excellent.
Okay, great. So the problem we're addressing is a problem that the industry has had for quite a while, and there's been various ways of hoping it will go away, but it really won't, which is that the teams, agile teams, work within the framework of a business, and the problem that the problem that won't go away is that the team needs to make and meet commitments to the business on what kind of development will be done. And then the problem is that, as I said, Agile planning is fraught with uncertainty. Stories, features are not light bulbs in a factory. They're not controllable like a Six Sigma process, and each one is different, and therefore the process isn't controllable, as I said. And so, since each story is different, each feature is different, the level of effort for any one of them is not certain. And not only that, but the team velocity is also not certain at any given moment and fluctuates. So development cannot be treated like a factory manufacturing line.
And still, the business is trying to plan and make commitments to their external customers. So the business and the external customers and stakeholders need and expect to know when things will get done. This is a natural aspect of business planning. And the conflict between Agile teams are struggling with uncertainty to make a commitment. The business is demanding that we have a plan and a commitment. That conflict is very difficult. Here's a fun infographic. When will it be done? Beats me. I really need to know. Well, that's too bad. Leading to a fight and then a declaration of get it done, just figure it out. Usually this results in technical debt, death marches, and other kinds of problems that I'm sure that we've all experienced to some degree. What happens in these cases? The teams sign up for overly optimistic plans, resulting in missed sprints. If you look at these numbers a little bit more closely, you can see that this team signed up for 16 points and delivered about 11. Signed up for 16 points again, delivered about 15 points. Signed up for a smaller number of points and delivered the whole sprint, and then signed up for 16 points again. I've seen teams do this way too often. The optimistic commitment for sprint or release plans resulting in missed sprints and pain and conflict as a result of that. Another effect of planning failures is the bow wave effect, or the found work problem. As the team is progressing, more and more work keeps getting identified and added to the backlog, resulting in late deliveries of what was originally scoped. Finally, one additional problem that is often seen is the green, 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 red problem. That is, everything looks fine until the last minute, and then it goes completely off the tracks. Being able to detect things are not on track or going off track earlier allows everyone the opportunity to make adjustments and still, within reason, meet those commitments.
So how the community is addressing this now is it's considered bad practice for an Agile team to make a commitment. Because essentially when the management is asking the Agile team to make a commitment to what's going to get delivered, they're asking the people who are making the commitment to take the risk. And then when the business doesn't get what it wants, it's not the business person's fault, it's the team's fault. And for good reason, Agile teams just are loath to do that. So the word these days is forecast. Well, we're willing to make sort of a forecast. And the difference between a forecast and a commitment is, in a good forecast, the team and the management share the risk and the uncertainty. So if the forecast says, well, this is what we're likely to be able to do, but this is how certain we could be, and we have an adult discussion between the management and the consultant and the developers as to what is the certainty behind that forecast, then at least everyone's sharing the risk and making a decision together. However, in the end, the business is committing resources based on the forecast. And so it's like making a bet. That is, they're applying resources hoping for a good outcome. And like any gambler, a successful, competent gambler, you need to use all the available information on hand in order to know the odds of winning the bet.
So a different way that this, there we go. So a different way that this conversation can go is asking, when will it be done? Answering, we're not sure, let's do a forecast. Now you have the immediate question of what features are most important, and now we get to figure out how do we make that forecast. There's very, very little actual guidance on how to make those forecasts. Common practice in Agile teams is to use planning poker. The very, very good aspect of planning poker is that it elicits expert opinions. The team is an expert in their own skills and in the work. One of the aspects of planning poker that is bad, all of the information that is present while playing planning poker, much of it gets thrown away. Only the final number gets captured. But the team has low and high numbers around the planning poker estimate. Those numbers typically get discarded, though. Another aspect of Agile planning that is used is the team will track their velocity and keep a history of the team's delivery. In this case, in the chart on the right, we see the team has an average velocity of 18 story points per sprint. It's a very common number. But of course, the team also will have variance and uncertainty around what they're going to be exactly in the next sprint. Sometimes they're higher, sometimes they're lower, and that's the natural way that sprints work. One of the dangerous assumptions is that the team will stabilize out to a very narrow range to an expected value. Teams seldom get very, very stable, and so assuming that we will creates risk in planning and causes the concerns over making a commitment or placing that bet.
So it's going back to the betting analogy. What we have in the previous chart is information that we're not really using. We're throwing away the information about the uncertainty the team has about the size of each stories, and we're throwing away the actual velocity history. So the question is as I am saying here, let's apply a few cliches and figure out how we can do something a little better. So this is the practice now. It's not working for most teams, particularly if the teams are doing things that involve any amount of innovation, and the innovation leads to uncertainty because you're doing things for the first time. So the standard cliche is insanity is repeating the same thing and expecting different results. So let's try something different. The other issue about doing estimation is that often the fear is that we don't have enough data to use estimation to do good estimates, because you only have a few stories and a few data points for the velocity, and there's all this worry about garbage in, garbage out. But garbage in leads to bad decisions. If you have enough data, you can make good decisions. In our case, it's a little different. What I say is what we have uncertainty going in. That's part of the information that enters into the system, and we have uncertainty going out. So, and since we're trying to find the odds, we're trying to find the level of uncertainty using the uncertainty that we already know we have. So how do you deal with uncertainty? This is the new things now. In general, as you all remember from your various stat courses or high school math or whatever, the way you capture uncertainty and levels of confidence is with probability distributions. So in this example of a standard bell-shaped Gaussian distribution, this is showing you the height. The x-axis is the value of something, and the y-axis is the probability that thing might happen. And it peaks at the mean, which is in this case at 80, and the width of this curve is 15. And if you remember from your math days, that roughly 60% is between 80 minus 15 and 80 plus 15. And this is how you start measuring probability distributions, is by looking at the shape of the distribution that you get from applying the models. So we're going to build a model and take out a probability and get a probability distribution out of it. And what we're going to get is the chance of success. Now, the other thing you may remember from your math days is that the area under the curve between the two values you care about is the probability of success. And so what we're going to do is we're going to build a forecast which is going to tell us how, given the size of number of stories and the total size of the story points for the sprint, and the sprint velocity that we're going to estimate from the history, how many sprints it's going to take to actually execute it. And since we're only planning a single sprint in this example, we want to know that the quotient of S over V is less than the probability of, we want to know the probability of that being less than 1. So now the math for doing that is actually beyond the scope of this conversation. We can talk, anyone who's really interested, we can explain how that's done, but we're using modern machine learning techniques and simulations.
I was just going to add that this shape, these curves, this is the best way we understand to build a forecast for a sprint. So Scrum dictates that we ought to be forecasting our sprints and our release plans and PI plans, but it doesn't give us any advice how to do it. And these are the ways that we've seen that provide the most value in communicating and representing what a real forecast looks like, that helps people make a decision, make decisions and place those bets, make those commitments together. Next slide.
Yeah, I want to say more about this slide.
Okay.
So in this slide here, we have an example of two outputs from the kind of models we're talking about, where the likelihood of success is essentially the area of the green part of the chart. So if you get a sprint forecast that says you're 70% likely, that's the area of the green part, and that means that you're being aggressive, and you say, well, maybe that's too aggressive for my team. My team doesn't tend to exceed, or maybe my team with a little bit of extra effort can actually make that. On the other hand, if you have the size of a sprint that says you only have a 34 chance of success, you probably should manage the content and have less in your chart and less in your sprint. So what you do, and we're going to tell you now how this chart is built.
I just wanted to make one more comment on the use of this in sprint planning. It is okay for sprinting teams to take a big risk sometimes, as long as everybody knows and we're making that decision for the right reasons. And so it could be a very rational and good idea to take a highly risky sprint plan, a 34% chance of success, as long as everyone recognizes that that's what we're doing, and we can talk about it and have the mature, disciplined conversation of doing that planning. Then this could be the right thing to try. If it goes wrong, then the team hasn't failed in any way. The team accurately understood their chance of success. Everyone agreed together that they wanted to take that risk, and we swung for the fences. So which of these two is the right one to go with depends on the context and the business decisions at hand. But knowing those probabilities lets people have a very rational conversation and really truly make a decision about how to move forward. So I mentioned earlier that planning poker is a common way of teams estimating. In planning poker, often only the expected number, the 8-story point estimate, survives and is carried into the tools as information. In the course of playing a game of planning poker, though, the teams actually have more information that gets lost later. The low estimate and the high estimate exist and are forgotten later. If you keep those three values, then you can build a probabilistic distribution for the story estimate. In this case, the chart is showing an estimate of 15 with a high of 25 and a low of 10. It could be that the team is very confident that this story won't be any less than the 15 number, and so the triangle could actually be lopsided. The low and the high and the estimated could be 15, showing that this has no chance of coming in sooner. It could also be that the high value could be very high, and that the team expects this work to be done in 15 units of work, but it could be as many as 40 or 80 units of work on the outside if a few of the risks happen to come true. And so capturing more information that we already have gives us the ability to use these estimates and these distributions in the course of calculating the risk of completing the work on time.
Yeah, this is built on techniques from Douglas Hubbard. In the book From How to Measure Anything, talks a lot about the use of these triangular distributions for all kinds of business estimation. And the key point here is that when the team bids 10, 15, and 25 or 23, I think it actually is in this chart. A little higher, it's 25. What they're saying, what happened in the planning poker thing is most people bid 15. Some people bid as low as 10, some have been as high as 25. That means collectively the team is uncertain. Why throw away that uncertainty? We'll use that as part of the modeling process. But since we have uncertainty going in, we have uncertainty coming out, hence we're measuring that as probabilities.
Yeah. One of the common pieces of advice that is given in Agile team estimation is if the team has higher uncertainty, to vote with a higher story point value. And so the teams, instead of voting what they think is the actual estimated time to do the work, perhaps it's 8 story points, the teams will actually vote higher and result in a 13 or a 20 story point estimate. There's a little bit of a conflict here. The teams are following good advice, but in reality they might be padding their numbers, their estimates a little bit, because they have no other choice. They're reflecting uncertainty as a higher estimation number. With this technique, the conversation is different. You can ask for an estimate, and you can say, what do you think it's probably going to be? What do you think the likely value is? And the team could give an 8-point story estimate. And then you can ask them also, well, what's the best case? Do you think that if it goes really well, it could come in sooner? And they might say, yes, the best case could be a 5 or a 3. And then what's the worst case? If things go wrong, how big could it get? And then the teams can come back with a 13 or a 20-point estimate. And in this way, we're capturing all of their thoughts and expert opinion on the matter. We also are not asking them to game the system in any way or to bias their estimates for uncertainty, but to make all of that explicit and clear.
And what's cool about this, John, is that it really respects the team.
Yeah.
And part of the whole theory of Agile is listen to the team. Don't force them into decisions that they know they don't want to make. And this carries that just one step further.
Yeah, it absolutely does. It lets the team be more honest, not follow the advice of uncertainty means higher estimates, even when they're not sure that that's the right answer. Meaning that everybody can be more transparent about what we actually think about the future, and have more effective conversations between the business and the development side.
Yes. So, what about velocities? Now, there's more than one way we could do this, but one way that we've put together is we look at the last set of team velocities, say the last 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, and then we grind through those using a machine learning algorithm to get another view of the probability distribution. This is a confidence view. And what it says is that if you want to be real safe and you don't think the team is going to, and you want to be risk adverse, it gives you an answer of how many points you should plan for. In this case, that's the blue area, and in that case, it's about 23. If you're willing to go to a 50% value, you want to be 50% confident, and you have reasons to believe that, well, you can have someone new on the team, or that there's not going to be as many distractions this week as there were in the previous weeks, you may go for that. And if there's business reasons to really get aggressive, because often you sort of need to, and you say, look, guys, we really do need this done for good business reasons. We know that the most aggressive number you can go up to in this case is 42. And then you say, well, if we're going to really make that bet and make those plans, then we've got to really focus down and get this done. Anything above that is just absurd. So we have sort of 2 views of this. One is just we have a way of taking the previous velocities and understanding from that what the probability distributions are of the velocities and the risks you're taking. And then we can use these numbers as a probability distribution and the story points to tell you what are the likelihoods of completing a sprint on time. Now, here's the thing. If you do what this sort of the standards, what it's sort of tendency what people have is, let's use the expected value of the sprint, or which it turns out is the average, and use these kind of statistics. What you're really doing is making a 50-50 bet.
Yeah.
And that's not safe. It actually means you're going to fail half the time.
Yeah. So the 50-50 bet is not, for some sprints, is definitely not high enough confidence in finishing it. And so the teams are left without any other advice. How do you place a safer bet in the sprint? And the conversation then becomes, well, how many points can you get done? Well, we're not exactly sure. How much confidence do we have? We've got the vote of confidence at the end of the planning session, but all of that is based on gut feel. And if you're just using the average, the average of your sprint velocity history, you end up with a 50-50 chance where there's pressure to try and commit to more, but there's uncertainty and risk in doing that. And none of it is clear, and none of it is an effective conversation that respects the team or management's needs in trying to plan.
So, going back to the very beginning of the story, where what we talked about is that for good reasons, Agile teams are loath to, unwilling to, and shouldn't have to make firm commitments based on the uncertainties of what they're doing. And the business has to have some notion of a forecast in order to commit business, other resources, and to know, like marketing and sales or product or engineering teams who are depending on the software or something, because there's business commitments. And so what you want to do is understand the uncertainty in both cases, identify risk, and do what you can to manage that uncertainty over time. And there's really two conversations that are going on. One is, in the sprint planning, it's really the agreement between the team members and their leads. So, and that's how planning poker goes, where everybody gets to vote on what they think the size of the stories are, and we get to track the team velocity. And then there's the conversation between the leads and the development management, and between the development manager and the enterprise. So you can apply these techniques down at the sprint level, like we've discussed here, or you can roll this up to the epic level and do exactly the same thing. You can track the previous team's team velocities, and you can augment that by understanding, well, in the past we got this velocity, but we have good reason to believe we could take the more aggressive number because we're going to add more people, or we think this problem is on the end more routine than some of the previous ones. And then you can also apply the 3-point estimates not only to the decomposed epics at the story level, but at the epics level. So in every so what this is really about is improving the conversations between the participants and the stakeholders, so that everybody really understands the kind of risks and forecasts they're taking, so they make the best bets overall.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to add Agile release planning or quarterly planning or SAFE's PI planning cycles. Those planning cycles are absolutely places where the rest of the enterprise, the business as a whole, is trying to get a strong feel for what they can count on being done by the end of the next quarter. And providing these kinds of analysis techniques and views changes the conversation between, can't you just try and put more in the PI, to what is the probability this amount of work will finish in the PI, and how much of a bet should we place on that work finishing? It becomes a cooperative conversation, not just a let's ask for more and hope we get something.
That's a good point. And one of the things that we want to point out is that the things we're talking about are really consistent with all the current Agile frameworks. Mm-hmm. This isn't a whole new way of doing Agile. It's just a way of doing Agile the way the various frameworks would want you to do it, but with slightly more, using the information in a more effective way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, John.
So we need to do something to change the conversation, to stop repeating the mistakes of the past. If we have opportunities to align our choices, our bets, with our appetite for risk. Some sprints or some release plans, we might want to swing for the fences. We think that we've got a 42% chance of completing this work on time. We're going to hope that we're going to get lucky, but we're making that decision together with the business and the development organization as a group, making that risky bet. Or we might want to have different conversations. We might want to say, no, we want to be very, very sure that this work will be done, we're going to only sign up for much more conservative, higher probability forecasts. Because in the context that we're playing placing these bets, we can't afford to overcommit in any way. And depending on what we want out of this process governs whether you want to judge, whether you want to sign up for higher risk or lower risk sprint decisions. One of the key aspects of this is that we use more of the information that we have available to us. We don't throw information away, and we have more honest conversations about the real probabilities of our success in our plans. If we can keep the high and low estimations, that provides a way of making obvious the uncertainties in our plans, and we can pull those together and use that to create better visualizations of our forecasts. Instead of just giving advice of you should forecast, we have actual mechanisms for how to do that becoming available to us. The last point, the actionable outcomes, is the ability to look at these forecasts and make decisions about what is it that we want to be able to do, how much risk should we sign up for, and if we want to sign up for a highly safe or highly risky sprint, actually getting the advice of, well, 23 points would be a very safe bet to place for the next sprint. Answering that question, how many points should we sign up for and to be in the safe zone, answers to those questions provide a lot of value and a lot of impact in changing the conversation and taking some of the drama out of the planning cycle in Agile teams. Would you like to add anything, Murray?
Yeah, one more point, which is this isn't a technique or a set of tools that replaces the Scrum leaders with some sort of automatic answer from a machine or an algorithm. This is a way that the Scrum Master and other team leads and the management can effectively be more efficient and more effective in making plans, and essentially is trying to take the drama out of this process so that we're having the right conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Giving more information to those team leads gives us the ability to make better decisions as a group. It does not replace Scrum Master in any way. And another point is the end of planning vote of confidence also should happen. That's the individual judgment in their own subjective opinions, voting how confident we are on a scale of 1 to 5 in the sprint or release plan. This is information that can be part of that, but it does not replace that in any way. It still depends upon and respects the team and augments the Agile team with more information.
So, Richard, I think we're ready to open it up for questions if there are any.
Okay, why don't you guys take a deep breath there, drink of water while we go through this. So I want to point out that you can ask questions at any time. You just type them in the pane on the GoToWebinar pane on the right-hand side. Just type in the questions and we will get to them. We do have some questions that were posed to us prior to the session and during the session. So I'm going to start reading these off, and we'll go get each one, hopefully. The first question is, what's the architecture owner's role?
So the architecture's role, architecture's owner's role is to create epics. Actually, it's two things. One is to create. When I've been an architect, the rule I always had was I have to be sure that the thing I'm building is implementable, so I can create a version of, maybe not the version that'll be shipped, but I know that this thing can be built. And I have to have enough of a prototype that people can start estimating the size. And so when an architect hands this off, he should be able to hand off an epic that people can say, based on previous experience, we can sort of say that this epic is somewhere between, say, 50 and 100 story points. And now a lot of the Agile people, and we expect it to be 70, and then you use that to roll up the same technique at the release level. Now, a lot of Agile say there's an argument within the Agile community whether that's a sensible thing to do, and before you start decomposing things into stories. The problem is that decomposing things into stories is a lot of effort, and may not be affordable and may prevent you from doing the innovative things you need to do. So the architect's role is to create something good enough and well enough specified that a high-level story estimate can be made.
Okay, great. The next question is a combination of, I'm sorry?
I was actually reading through some of the questions. Do you mind if I jump down to some of the ones that are more tuned into the topic that we're covering right now?
Sure, yep.
Okay, great, thanks. I'd like to hear more about methods for prioritizing and dependency management during Agile planning. So this question goes into more detail about different types of dependencies like UX. But I would comment that dependency management and prioritization are important aspects that the kind of uncertainty management that we're talking about can all work together in concert. The ability to tie things together in a dependency structure, in order to deliver this feature, we need these three stories. Gives us an ability of understanding at the higher level, at the release or the PI planning level, which features must have the stories stay bound together, and we can actually treat those as an aggregate for risk and estimation of uncertainty in the planning system. And so the dependency management can feed into a greater whole of looking at these more aggregated things, the features or the epics in a quarterly planning cycle. And so the combining dependencies, combining the uncertainties together gives you a even more appropriate view of how effective we are at planning and delivering on those plans at the quarterly level.
Yeah, and oh wait, there's more. One of the things we're beginning to look at for the next iteration of this is if you have uncertainty of delivery of one thing, and then you have uncertainty of delivery based on the dependency, what is the aggregate uncertainty? So a simple paradigm for that is I may have story points for testing, I may have story points for development, and I want to look at the aggregate of done.
Yeah.
And we're beginning to look at that now, actually. We have some techniques for doing that. But the point is that it's really the same technique. It's just sort of iterated on each other. And then if it turns out that there's more uncertainty in one than the other, then you can work on and do sort of kind of product lean stuff to figure out where you want to reassign the assets and do the risk management to aggregate the total, to minimize the total risk by addressing where the risk lies in the plan. So these techniques do scale to that.
So one of the other questions that I think can readdress very, very crisply, how is uncertainty risk handled when estimating duration or effort? Very, very simply, the style from Hubbard's book on how to measure anything is providing the expected value, the low best case, and the high worst case values. Not only allows us to be more open and transparent about what we think really will happen, but it gives us the information for how uncertain we are. The wider apart the low and the high are, the more the uncertainty is in this story or this work effort. And by providing that information right into the planning and the data around our stories and our backlogs, that gives us a way of reflecting the uncertainty in a way that provides more transparency and more ability to help us predict and forecast better.
Okay. Well, was there another question that you guys saw when the questions that came in previously that you wanted to address now, or and also
well,
everyone you can ask questions at any time by typing them in that the screen on the right-hand side, the control panel there. So we'll get to them as soon as they come in.
We can do more, but have any questions come in, Rich?
Nothing new has come in just yet, so why, if you guys wanted to take the questions that you see that came in advance and go with those, that'd be great. So John, if you want to pick one of those other ones.
Yes. One of the other questions is, how does data fit into the process? I think that we've probably already answered this question very clearly, but I want to repeat it because I think it's very important. the data around our estimates and our uncertainties, we have more data available to us in terms of, even while playing planning poker, the lows and the highs, and our sprint histories have distributions around them, around how likely we are to come in with this many points or that many points in each sprint. This also applies to Kanban systems as well. We're talking about iteration-based sprints, but Kanban systems have history of flow of work through the various columns as well. That data is also the same kind of information that we're talking about for sprint histories. When we use all of the data that we have available to us, and we then apply it into a forecast that allows us to see that data in a way that we can make decisions from a business perspective, I think that's how the data can be used, is not throwing it away, using all the data that we have, and visualizing the data in a way that makes the forecast actually usable and actionable in our conversations.
Right. I want to take the last question.
Well, you should take the last
question. I will then. Okay. Again, so the last question is actually really important, which is, what are the ways to overcome disagreements between tech mavericks in a distributed agile group, agile setup, but part of the established organization? And this is exactly the point of our stuff, is that the tech mavericks, if you think they have any credibility at all, and you probably do, then we should listen to them, and we can accommodate their difference of opinion by one, eliciting what they think the values are, and second, now this enters into a conversation, why do you think that? And if the team can't get to a consensus, okay, don't waste a lot of time trying to get to consensus, just put in the values, knowing that the team overall is that uncertain. In fact, that's sort of the point of all this, is that it helps. There can't be certainty on everybody, and forcing consensus just actually creates more drama than is necessary, and is more drama than is useful. But by accommodating the different points of view, given the fact that there needs to be uncertainty, and seeing how that rolls up into actionable distributions and views of the overall level of effort, that's where these techniques really can apply in the agile situation.
Yes, and I'd like to add more to this one too. This is a great question.
Yes.
The disagreements that often come from tech mavericks or tech visionaries that I've experienced in the past is often around things that are innovative and risky in nature, and trying to wrestle through the business needs of stability and commitment and the technology needs of innovation and creating whole new opportunities that aren't yet understood from a business side. Wrestling through those topics is very, very difficult. The tools and techniques that we're talking about in this session don't address all of that, but they do provide a lot more clarity around what are the actual risks and uncertainties that we're talking about. And giving teams and giving these tech mavericks permission to take some highly risky steps, they might completely succeed, or there's a fair chance that they're not going to work. But having that conversation, how many times should we take a risky sprint? How many big risky epics should we bring into our quarterly or yearly planning cycles? That conversation and being able to objectively interpret how big a risk we're taking allows the tech mavericks and the business establishment to have a real conversation and to bring in those innovative aspects into the planning process without risking the overall plan as a whole in aggregate.
So you can get the balance between taking the risk to do innovative work, but not and failing occasionally. Or you can say we're completely risk averse and we're willing to have a later schedule because we're not willing to fail at all. And you can make those trade-offs collectively.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the other thing I just say is that this is more than just sort of notional stuff. We have working code that we use in our consulting practices to actually make these work. So Any other questions, Richard?
Yeah, I was just going to say, no new questions have come in. I just want to remind everyone you can submit questions through the questions pane in your attendee control panel on the right-hand side. But since we're waiting, in case anyone has one, and we are still have 10 minutes scheduled, I thought I'd give you each a couple minutes to give any closing points you wanted to give, any notes you felt that should be taken from this webinar that are most important. I figured if each one of you wants to just take a couple minutes and do that, that'd be great.
I think that we certainly can do that. I also would ask of the audience the conflict between planning, risk, or stability in the teams that are in your organizations. If anybody in the audience could type back to us just a few sentences about the experience in your organization that you have with teams trying to plan between the pressure of committing to more story points or having more certainty around being able to deliver on the plan. If anybody can comment on that situation, I would love to hear your thoughts on it and your experiences on it.
So I think we've made our final points, but I do have one thing to say. This is we're sort of in the early adopter visionary part of trying out these techniques. We've had some experience with these. They've been successful with us so far, and we're working to develop the set of features. We're sort of in a minimal viable product mode where we're looking for the set of features that will help the most amount of people the soonest. So anyone who's interested, please contact us through the Cutter channels, and we can discuss together how this might work in your organization and what flavor of this makes sense for you. So far so good, and we find that this really does do what we hope it will do, which is sort of finally do something different to solve a problem that's just not going away.
Yeah, if teams can move forward with more confidence and less disagreement and less drama, then these ideas have been very fruitful. The ability to actually create a forecast and talk about it has been declared as a thing that is important in Scrum and in SAFe for years now. But there's very little advice on how to actually do that. And so these ideas and visualizations are very important to us in ways of actually making that true and filling in the implementation details for how Agile teams can move forward and succeed with confidence and less drama.
Okay, great. No one chimed in with the answer to your questions there, John. Maybe they're just being a little shy or whatever. But we have no more questions in the queue. So why don't we just end it there? I want to thank Murray and John and thank everyone for attending today's webinar. If you have any other questions, please feel free to contact us. I have the contact information up on the screen right now. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we'd appreciate it if you would complete and provide your feedback. It helps us improve these. And you also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view the recording of today's webinar. On behalf of Cutter and our presenters, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today and hope you have a great rest of your day.